So we have the honor of having Ken Dunn here, and his resume reads like a business bucket list. So he has made 7 figures flipping property, raised millions of capital, built a private real estate financing firm, sold $1 million worth of assets on ClickFunnels, coached over 1,300 real estate investors, owns resorts in Ontario, PEI, developed 125 short-term rental cottages, owns a hot tub company. Last week he became a realtor, and he owns a gold mine. So please welcome up Ken Dunn.
Sounds pretty cool. That's not even my favorite part of the story, to be honest with you. You know, if somebody were to ask me, like, what's my plan? What's this long term? Why am I building all these assets? What am I doing? The only way I could logically think of to share this with you, what the master plan here is I like trying new shit. Is there anybody here in the room that likes to try new shit? But there's a secret to all of this, and it's one of the many things that I want to share with you over the next half hour so that I get to chat with you. And the secret to all of it is raising capital, is raising money. And I think when I look at all the skill sets that I've mastered over the last 30 years, that's the skill set I think that made all the difference. When you hear about all these things that I own, every one of them required me going out and convincing a group of people to lend or invest in what I was doing in order for me to acquire that asset. And so if you want to master anything in your life, you want to think about that stuff for sure. Here's the part they didn't say, and this is a very important part of the story. I started my adult life in investigative policing. At 18 years old, I joined the military police. While I was involved with the military police, I got seconded to the RCMP and spent 2 years undercover buying and selling drugs. It was a really cool experience. I love dope. Haven't touched it since I left that, but I was living in Halifax, Nova Scotia at the time. I got seconded to the RCMP, ended up undercover in Gagetown, New Brunswick, and working in an infantry kitchen as a cook. And we were investigating a whole bunch of military guys that were bringing uncut cocaine back from Germany to Canada in the tailpipes of Iltis vehicles, which were little jeeps that they used in the military in the wars. I did that for a couple of years. I love this picture. One of my favorite pictures in the world. Does everybody recognize that thing on the back of my neck there? What do we call those things? Who remembers what those are called? Mullet. Yep. I had a mullet and I had a football field on my face, 11 lines on each side. It's fantastic. It was a really great experience for me. I spent 15 years in investigative policing. I started out in the military police. I went to the RCMP. I did undercover drug work. I was on a SWAT team for 4 years. Then I moved to Ottawa, Canada, where I got into major crime investigation. And most of the time, in 10 years that I was with the Ottawa police, I did police interrogation. I was one of 2 interrogators in the police department, and I interrogated 18 people that committed major crimes, including murder, and 17 of them confessed. And here's what I'm going to prove to you guys in the next 45 minutes. The skills that I used to get people to confess to serious crimes are the exact same skills that I use today. My companies right now today raise between $1 and $2 million every single month for our real estate deals. And it's the same skill set. So I started actually learning how to fundraise for real estate deals in my early 20s. Something really amazing happened when I was 32 years old, and this is where my real estate journey started. When I was 32 years old, I was a major crime investigator at the Ottawa Police. My wife, who you see on this slide, was a nurse. We lived in the suburbs of Ottawa. My wife came home from work one day and said she was pregnant. It was the most amazing day of my life. As long as I can remember, from when I was a young man, I said I wanted to be a father. It was the most important thing for me. How many parents are here today? So as we have that first child, everybody in this country, we all say the same thing. It's the first vow we make to our children. And I guarantee you, every parent in this room said that. And I'll tell you what it was. You looked at your child and you said, I swear on my life, I promise to you, you're going to have a better life than... We all say that, right? And that's what I said. For me at the time, knowing that my son was coming, I didn't want to raise my kids as a cop. We were just over broke. You know, I was making $100,000 a year. My wife was making good money, but we were keeping up with the Joneses. We were spending it as fast as we could make it. I wanted to be wealthy. I wanted to be able to give my kids a better life. And I had no freaking idea what to do. The only thing I could think of is when I lived in Ottawa, one of my best friends, his dad owned a major insurance company. And I thought all my buddies that I had that were cops, are there any cops here today? Any firefighters here today? So cops and firefighters, they all have side gigs. They all do things on the side. And all my buddies in the Ottawa Police Department, they all had these side gigs. So I thought, the first thing I thought was, I got to make more money. My buddy owned a major insurance company. So I went into my buddy's office and I said, Paul, Julie's pregnant. I need to make more money. Can I sell insurance? And as soon as I said this to him, he started laughing. And I said, I don't think there's anything funny about that. What are you laughing about? He said him and his father had been talking all weekend. They wanted to start a new company and they were trying to figure out who they knew that could help them start the company. And it was my name that they kept talking about. And I said, I don't know anything about starting companies. He called out to his dad, asked his dad to come in the room, and Mr. Manta explained to me that they owned a major insurance company with over 50,000 homeowner clients, and every single week, dozens of their clients would call their company asking for advice on mortgages. And so they said they wanted to start a mortgage company, but neither of them had time to run it. And I looked at Mr. Manta and I said, I know nothing about business. I know nothing about mortgages. And he said, but we think you'd be perfect for this and I trust you. So if you're willing to do this with us, we'll let you run the company. You'll be the CEO of the company. I'll teach you everything I know about this. We'll do well together. Everybody who's looking for mortgages that are insurance clients, we'll give them to the mortgage company. We'll give you 20% ownership of it. We'll pay you what you make as a cop now because you're going to have to quit your job. And we'll give you a 5% override on all the revenue. And he said, there's one condition. And I said, what's that? He said, after you pay off all your debt, all the money you make working with me, you have to put it into real estate. I'm going to teach you how to build a real estate portfolio because that is the only way that you can guarantee you're going to break the nut and you're going to build true wealth for your family. So right away, I said, fucking right, I'll do it. Yes, I'm going to quit my job. Now, I got to ask you guys a question. At the time, I was a cop for 17 years. How many people in this room have worked in the same industry or the same job line for more than 15 years in this room? Raise your hands. How many people would have the guts to walk away from that on a moment's notice if you had somebody make that offer to you? Raise your hands if you'd be willing to do that. Not a lot of people would. I'll tell you who wouldn't do it, who wouldn't even consider it, my wife. So my wife is 6 months pregnant and I go home from work that day and I'm like vibrating all the way home thinking about how wealthy I'm going to be and how rich I'm going to be. I'm going to run a major company. I walk into the kitchen, she's standing there, she's just starting to show and you can tell she's a little bit disheveled. She's not been having a good day. And I look up to her and I grab her by the arms. I said, we're going to be rich. You're not going to believe what I did today. And she looked at me with the most angry look. And I didn't even tell her yet. She says, what did you do? I'm like, fuck, this might not have been a good idea. So I told her I'm quitting my job and I'm starting a company, starting a mortgage company, and I'm going to change our lives forever. And it was the first time she ever hit me. But I did it. And her being angry about it was what fueled me. There was no way I was going to fail doing it. I ran that company for 4 years. It was the most amazing thing that ever happened to me. Mr. Manta was true to his word. He taught me everything that I knew. In 4 years, we funded $480 million in mortgages. The company made over $45 million in revenue. I paid off all my debt. I changed my life forever. And 4 years later, I owned a real estate portfolio with 18 doors just in the city of Ottawa. It was all like little condos and apartments and houses and stuff like that. It was really freaking cool. 4 years later, Mr. Manta comes into my office one day and everything is going great. We've now got 2 kids at home. My son's 4, my daughter Laura's 2. And he looks at me and he says, Ken, I've got some great news. I'm like, well, can't be any better than what I'm doing now. And he says, I want to buy you out. I got the company appraised. It's worth $40 million. I want to buy you out. Right away, I'm looking at him and I'm scared to death. I'm like, what did I do wrong? I thought I was being fired. I didn't even know what buy you out meant. But he gave me 20% ownership of the company. He had an appraisal done and the company was worth $40 million. So what he was telling me is he wanted to write me a check for 20% of $40 million. How much is that? $8 million. And I said yes. It was the first time I retired. I was 34 years old. I cashed out of that company and made $8 million. It was unbelievable. And now I'm playing around with real estate investing. But I never really started taking it that seriously. But, I was sitting here as we were getting ready to have this conversation and I was asking myself, like, what do I really hope you guys get out of this? There's probably a lot I can teach you about real estate investing because real estate investing is really simple. And we'll go over some of those principles. But what I want you to be inspired by is what's possible if you put your mind to it. If you back yourself into a corner and you say you have no choice but to do this thing. Because the whole reason I fought for 20 years to make the money I've made and build the life I have is so I could give my kids everything that they wanted. My son is 24 years old today. He graduated from university 4 years ago. He spent the last 3 years working at a golf resort in St. Andrews, Scotland. He graduated from university. He doesn't have a dime in student debt. This is when he was 15 years old. We invested thousands and thousands of dollars in his hockey education and hockey coaching. And when he was 15 years old, he was playing for Team Canada. And that's the C on his jersey. He literally was going the distance in hockey. What pissed me off about it is we came back from this tournament and he quit. Oh, I'm telling you, it was nuts. They were talking about the OHL with this kid in everything. He quit playing hockey and started playing golf. And now he's a scratch golfer. He was just given the opportunity to do anything he wanted. And money was never an issue for us because I made that my intention to do that stuff. My daughter just graduated from university 3 weeks ago. She graduated with a cum laude or something like that. She had a 98% average graduating from university and has no student debt. So we've given our kids everything we've wanted, and it's probably the most important thing of my whole life to me. When it comes to real estate investing, I went through that period where working with Mr. Manta, I built a really intentional real estate portfolio, got up to about $10 million. After we sold out of the mortgage company, we were living in Ottawa, Canada, and probably about 3 months later, I was having dinner with my wife, and I looked at her and I said, if we left Ottawa and moved somewhere else, because neither of us were from there, who would we come back to visit? We both said that it was time to move. We moved closer to our families just outside of Toronto, and I sold that portfolio. When I moved down to Toronto, I got into a whole different industry, digital marketing. I literally spent about 10 years building a book publishing company and a digital marketing company where I used to teach entrepreneurs how to write books about expertise they had and then how to turn those books into online coaching businesses. But I never stopped playing around with real estate. Wasn't taking it really seriously, but I never stopped playing around with it. 2017 is when I got really serious about it. And starting in 2017, from then until today, the value of this real estate portfolio is $1.4 billion. And I'll explain what that value is all about in a couple seconds. But that means if you think about that, in 7 years, I took a portfolio that started with this property I'm about to tell you about and grew it from 0 to $1.4 billion. What happened was back in 2017, we were living a good life. We were having fun. We were focusing on our kids. And one of the things we always did with our kids every summer is we would go to a cottage. We would rent somebody's cottages. We loved these vacations. We'd probably try to do 2 of them every year. The summer of 2017, I had rented a cottage on a lake called Lake Joseph in Ontario. It's probably one of the nicest lakes in the whole province. The cottage we rented was a big major mansion. It was $12,000 for the week. I was so looking forward to it. We were getting the guy's boats. We were getting all the stuff he had at his house. 1 week before the vacation, he canceled on me, and it pissed me off. Middle of the summer in Ontario, you can't find a decent cottage a week before a vacation. So I struggled, and I found a place for the family to go. We ended up in a little cottage commune. Anybody ever gone on a vacation in a cottage subdivision? You know what that is? So on Lake Ontario, in an area called Prince Edward County, there was this subdivision, thousands of houses in it, cottages. They said it was a cottage community, but it was rows and rows of cottages on square grid streets. And we were literally 18 rows back from the water. And there were cottages. It was more tightly packed than a low residential community. It was freaking crazy. I spent the whole week there pissed off. And I said, I'm not ever going to let myself do this again. I'm going to buy a cottage. I'm going to get into it and get back at it. Now, here's what's interesting. In a couple minutes from now, I'm going to help you to understand what Mr. Manta taught me about real estate investing literally 25 years ago. He said, listen, anybody can master real estate investing. How many people in this room would like to build a $100 million real estate portfolio? On average, a $100 million real estate portfolio in this country will make you between $3 and $4 million a year in income. That's kind of how the math works if you look at it. If you want to build a $100 million real estate portfolio, Mr. Manta told me there's 4 skills that you have to master. You absolutely have to master them. But it's only 4. How many people would be willing to master 4 skills if it meant you could build a $100 million portfolio? Here's the first skill. You have to be able to identify undervalued properties. You heard Tony talking about it up here earlier. He's looking at wholesale deals. He's looking for properties that are cheaper than what they would sell for on MLS. In anything you're doing, you have to figure out how to buy undervalued properties. If you're looking at doing multifamily and you're going to buy apartment buildings, you need to find properties that are cheaper than what they're going for in the market. You got to master that. The second thing you have to master, fundraising. You have to learn how to raise capital. How many people have wanted to do a real estate deal, but you haven't had the cash to do it? It stopped you. Imagine getting into a place where you never have to worry about money. In Canada right now, there's said to be over $1.2 trillion in capital sitting in the market that's not being utilized. 95% of that capital is held by people that are only willing to invest in one asset class. What do you think that is? Mortgages, real estate. So that means there's $1.2 trillion available for us in this market. You got to learn how to get that money. The third thing you have to learn is how to increase the value of a property. Now, I'll show you a really easy way to increase the value of property. This is a cottage that I bought. This is the one that I bought because that guy pissed me off. I bought this property in Ontario. It was a lakeside cottage. I paid $465,000 for it. I bought it because I knew it was worth more than that. I got an appraisal done when I was buying it that said it was worth $550,000. $90,000. So that means I was buying it $90,000 cheaper than what it was really worth. The next step in that process, I got all the money to buy it. I literally went to a mortgage broker and got him to give me a first mortgage from a private lender for $300,000. And then to get the other $165,000 to buy that property, you know what I did? I went to 3 of my buddies who had RRSPs and I offered them 15% if they lend me their RRSP money for a year. Raise your hands if you're in this room right now and you never heard that you could actually go to your own friends and ask to borrow the money from their RRSPs to do real estate deals. I'll explain how that works, but I do it for all of my deals. So I convinced my buddies to do that. Now, why would they want to do that? I said to them, what are you making now with your RRSPs? What are you guys making on your registered funds investments? Your RRSPs, TFSAs, LIRAs, and all that shit. What are you making? 5%, 6%? So I went to my buddies and I said, I'll pay you 15%. So we got their RRSPs transferred out of their RRSPs. They gave me the money and I literally used it to buy this property. And then what I did is I looked at this property and I said, how can I radically increase the value? If there's anybody here that wants to do this, that wants to buy a cottage and make a lot of money renting it on Airbnb, here is the #1 biggest hack that I know about cottages. I've done this over 100 times. If you want to double the value of a property when you create the lift, the increase in value, find an old dilapidated 3-season cottage and turn it into a house. Turn it into a 4-season cottage. We put $240,000 into this property. We lifted the property up. We put a basement in it, proper basement, and then we literally gutted the place and rebuilt it. When it was finished, when we started, it was a 3-bedroom property with 1 bathroom in it. When we were finished, it was a 5-bedroom property with 2.5 bathrooms. And it was freaking gorgeous. I got an appraisal. When it was finished, it was worth $1.4 million. That's the whole strategy right there. When I first finished this property, I started renting it on Airbnb and made about $15,000 a month with it, but I realized there were too many neighbors too close to it, so I ended up selling it for $1.4 million. But you think about that, I owned this property for a year and a half. I bought it for $465,000. I put $200,000 into it. It was all private capital. I didn't use a dime of my own money to do it. When you guys hear this stuff about using private capital, I paid 15% for the first mortgage, 15% for the second mortgage. Then I borrowed the $250,000 I needed for the renovations, and I paid 15% for that too. The payments I had to make on those mortgages every month in that year was about $11,000 a month. You understand the concept of using private capital, other people's money? How many people wouldn't be able to do that deal because you wouldn't be able to afford to pay the $11,000 a month in interest payments? So you know what I do? I borrow that money too. So whenever I do any real estate do, I create what you call an interest reserve. The big real estate developers in the world that do this shit, that's what they do. They figure out what's the total interest obligation for the term you're borrowing the money, and you borrow that money too. So I borrowed all the money to do that. So I was into this property for $765,000 all in. So I sold it for $1.4 million. So it means I made $700,000 in one transaction. How many people want to do that? I mean, it's really simple to do. But what I ended up doing, today I own a portfolio. We have 10 cottages that we rent on Airbnb, but I started seeing how successful these cottages were, and I started doing bigger projects. What you want to do if you're just getting started in real estate investing is you want to focus on small projects that put cash in your pocket. Wholesaling is a great thing to do in your portfolio, but it's not the only thing you should do because you have to master those 4 skills, right? Find undervalued properties, get good at raising the money to do it, get good at increasing the value of the properties, and then exiting successfully. If you want to master those 4 skills, the best ways in the world to do that are flipping houses or doing things like this.